Lisa. I am the community manager here at Cultivate. I use she, her pronouns, and I am going to be your facilitator and host for today's featured workplace community leader event with Penny. And we are going to get started in a couple of minutes, but I just want to make sure everyone has a moment to arrive. So I would love to invite you to take the next 2 minutes or so to do or get anything that would make you feel more comfortable or more present for our time together. So maybe that's snoozing your Slack messages. Maybe that's grabbing a glass of water or a notebook. Maybe you've been jumping from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting all day, and what you need is a deep breath, or maybe to stretch in your chair for a moment. Whatever you need to arrive here. And we will get started in another minute. I see folks checking in from where they're zooming in from. This is so rad. And while we wait for some more folks to join us, this is a Cultivators community event. So if you're not familiar with our Cultivators community, I hope you will check us out. We'll add a link to chat in a moment. It is our private Slack community, but it is more than that. It is our place to gather as trailblazers and corporate change makers, to hang out, to chat, to share ideas, and to come together to mobilize for change. So if you're not there already, I hope that you will join us there really soon. Okay, give folks another minute. We are in Boston. This is my first time in Boston, and I'm very excited. All right, folks. Welcome, welcome to the folks who've joined us in the last couple of minutes. Again, my name is Lisa. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the community manager here at Cultivate. And I just want to give you a little bit of an overview before we get started. And while we do that, I'd love to get an idea of who's here and if you've been here before. So I'm going to launch a poll about whether you've been to one of Cultivate's events before. Awesome. I see there are people who've been here before, so welcome back. There's folks who have never joined us, so welcome to your first one. It's going to be a good one, and it's actually my first one hosting, so it feels special that you're here starting with me. Awesome. And how this event will run. We're going to spend about 20 to 25 minutes, myself and Penny, chatting, and then we are going to move into about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. So if throughout the course of the event you have any questions for Penny, you can feel free to pop them in chat and we will make sure that we read them to her so that she can answer. Or you can wait until that Q&A portion and you can raise your hand. You'll find the raise your hand key under reactions in the bottom toolbar of your Zoom screen. And if you do that, you can ask Penny directly with your voice. So if you are open to that, we hope you do. We'd love to hear from some of you directly. And then we will just come back together for the last 5 minutes to kind of close. So I see folks, end this poll. I see folks starting to introduce themselves in chat, but if you would jump in there, introduce yourself, maybe share where you're zooming in from, what brought you to this event today. And while you introduce yourselves, I am going to go ahead and intro our guest, Penny Schnarrs, today. I'm going to find you and add you. Hi, Penny. Penny most recently wrapped up a role at Highmark Health in internal communications, where she partnered closely with HR strategy and executives to increase employee engagement, to roll out a new mission, vision, and strategy, and to create a new intranet and new ways of connecting and collaborating with M365 and other tools and resources. She's also a part-time faculty at Point Park University, teaching first-year students, And she spent her 20-plus-year career building meaningful connections to create positive impact, and is excited to do so again at the AAMC, or Association of American Medical Colleges, after nearly a decade hiatus in her new role as the manager of virtual communities. I just got a chance to meet with Penny last week. It was a wonderful conversation, and I was immediately just blown away by how much she centers connection and authenticity in her work and in how she shows up to conversations. So I'm so thrilled for you all to hear from her today. Hi, Penny. Are you ready to talk community?
Talk community. And hi, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces and people from my community. So thanks for showing up, and to those that I don't know, I hope that we become fast friends. So thanks for being here, and I hope that we uh, can give you some tidbits to take away with you today. And feel free to ask away, interrupt, and be an active participant.
Awesome. Let's get into some questions. So my first question for you is, you started MVPs at Highmark Health, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about MVPs, what the process of creating them were like, also what they are, and what was the impact that you were hoping for when you were creating them, versus kind of what came out of them.
Sure. So MVPs, that stands for Mission Vision Pack. And when I was at Highmark, I was tasked with helping roll out the new mission and vision while we were there. And that was sort of challenging, right? When you want to get people on board with the mission and vision of an organization, and you want to communicate that, and you want to do that from a very hierarchical kind of communicative rollout. And so I practiced what I knew. And my background is very much from a nonprofit and volunteer management and grassroots initiatives, right? And all I kept thinking was, I am very motivated and driven by impact and by mission and vision work. And I can't imagine that I'm the only person at this 43,000 employee company to feel that way. And so I thought, well, I'm going to pitch this idea, and hopefully people won't think I'm insane. And luckily, they did not. And so it started out very humbly, and I just simply put on one of our surveys, would you like to help keep the mission and vision at the forefront of what we do? Would you like to help tell others and keep them informed? And that's how it started. When I left Highmark, we were, I think, probably about 275 people strong across the enterprise, of people who were like-minded in that they wanted to be engaged and wanted to help others remember the impact that you could have in your role, regardless of whether you were on the front lines of of the organization, right, directly interacting with patients, or you were behind a computer all day, lifting each other up. And it became a real community in every sense of the word, right? Really helping to break down silos and support one another in these really meaningful ways. And at a time where, having satellite offices in multiple states and in, really different parts of the world in some cases, and in hospital settings and in office settings, and really finding ways for people to find one another and find ways to interact and connect and understand how their work impacted one another. And if you're having an off day, that's okay, but let's remember and center, right, how that work kind of all comes back together. And it was everything from, right, the simple piece of that when it started was, I am one person and I cannot be responsible for the communication of the mission and vision, very selfishly, and I don't wanna be, and I'm a collaborator, and I am a community person, I'm a connector, right? So very selfishly, I wanted to find people, and what it turned into was finding some of the most lovely and amazing, um, and passionate people, that became friends and family, truly, right, across the organization, and really helped to break down those silos. Some people I still have never met in person, and Annette is one of those people that's on this call who stuck with it and became one of the volunteer leaders of that group, and it just grew and blossomed, and it became right, it's what the community itself wanted and needed, and we right, we know that it shifts and shapes based on the community needs, and it was a beautiful experience, and, um, I get a little verklempt about it when I talk about it because, watching that literally go from me thinking, "Oh, this is never gonna jive at this really large corporate entity," to finding my people and finding people who now, since I've left, are keeping that community growing and evolving and taking it to places I could have never even imagined is just beautiful. It's beautiful. That's what it's about.
It's 100% what it's about. I love that you really asked folks to take that agency and step up, and in doing that kind of found your folks who were willing to take the reins and take that responsibility and kind of bring that mission and vision to life, in the ways that you interact. One thing that came up when we were chatting, before this event last week, was around change, and you talked about embracing change both in your new role at the AAMC and then also kind of within the context of the larger pandemic. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit what excites you about change. What do you view change as in your work?
I think that, there's that old trite expression, right? Like the only constant is change, right? But to me, I think that there's this beautiful opportunity with change. Um, and I think most people reflect on the opportunity for innovation and learning. And I agree with that. But for me, it's so much deeper because there is the opportunity for shared um, experience with change, right? There is such a human um, emotion when it comes to change. And I think oftentimes when we talk about change management, we forget completely about the human emotion connected to that because it is so scary. And we go through that whole grief cycle often, right, when we talk about change. And the dynamic of meeting someone where they are and helping them through that process and being a part of that process with someone and watching them evolve and then watching whatever impact the change had on the person and you sharing in that experience with them, I think is so much deeper. And then whatever the end product is on top of that is amazing.
I love that so much. Speaking of change, you are back at the AAMC
Yeah.
after time away.
Yes.
What brought you back, and what called to you about the role that you're in now working in virtual community?
Yes. So after a decade hike, feeling my age a little bit. So the Association of American Medical Colleges, we talk in alphabet soup a lot. Um, in my past and even in my present, I've spent a lot of time um, either directly in roles that relate to health whether it was working in health-related nonprofits or in my most recent role, obviously in Highmark Health. Um, and so obviously something that we're all affected by, right? And I think in particular, I think we've all been inherently aware in the last 19 months now, right, since COVID. Um, and I think that everyone has been talking about the reality is here, right? We have to be better and fix and change and innovate and evolve when it comes to health and healthcare and well-being. And um, so I've always, we've worked. Highmark Health continues to work very hard at that. And I had the pleasure of, working very closely, um, not just our mission and vision, but obviously that also directly impacted the new strategy there, and everyone's right trying to fix and innovate and change it. Uh, the AAMC, uh, 2 or 3 years ago, David Sporkin, their new CEO, came, and obviously been following the AAMC since I left, and still again integrated into that world. My wife is a pediatric emergency care physician and a fellowship director, and so still kind of in that world when we talk, and uh, being in right the world that I was in healthcare, and so following that, and saw this shift um, when David came on board at the AAMC, and his authenticity and transparency in how he spoke, and especially in the context of COVID, and then during all of this upheaval, I think that so many of us were feeling and experiencing, um, and during Black Lives Matter, and being um, very authentic, and very um, vocal, and um, putting himself out there. And, we talk a lot in buzzwords, right? But we don't often hold ourselves accountable. And I saw this shift, and really small nuance, right? But something as simple as him making sure that the AAMC changed this shift from saying that we serve and lead to we lead and serve. And we have nearly 500,000 people between faculty, staff, residents, fellows, medical students, um, at the medical schools, and academic hospitals that are members of the organization, um, that we directly serve and um, help influence. And then you think about that ripple effect, right? Um, and then I saw this position, and being a program manager of virtual community, um, and seeing that they invested in a position to really help with these new strategic plans and um, initiatives to really again be accountable and lead, and not just talk in buzzwords, but really put action behind, and have the opportunity to bring the right voices to the table, and to see the possibilities around what we can do with something like building community around something like this. So that is what brought me back, and um, excites me to see how we can, as a larger organization, can partner and bring community members together and really think, um, and be mindful, and really do some real damage in a good way.
I love the phrasing of good damage so much.
Make some good trouble, right?
Yeah,
To quote John Lewis. Yeah.
yeah. That's amazing. And I hear so much about leadership, and also how thoughtfully you all are building community and thinking about community. And not to quote you to yourself, but to quote you to yourself, when we talked last week, we were talking about measuring community, and we touched on engagement. I think a tricky part of community building is often, how do we measure if it's working? And you said, maybe my favorite thing, you quoted The Princess Bride and said that when companies talk about engagement, it's like an, I don't think that word means what you think it means situation. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, what do we miss when we go all in on engagement, and maybe what else should we be paying attention to when it comes to measuring community?
I feel like I should get that like on a t-shirt now, right? Yeah, I think again, engagement gets like buzzworded, right? Um, we're gonna get buttons. Um, and I think we're well-meaning and well-intended when we use that word. Um, but it is engagement is a really heavy lift when we talk about it, right? And I used to do a road show. So I come from, right, again, I come from a fundraising and alumni relations background. And again, people from my past tribe and communities are out there, and um, make that trend, penny merch, make it trend. And so we know, right, whether you are building relationships in person or virtually, it takes a lot. And I had this engagement cycle diagram that I would literally like go from department to department, and whether it was internally or I would utilize this with donors, with volunteers, whatever the case would be. And I think it still applies, um, because it's about so many things. Engagement is about so many things to get people truly comfortable, right? You have to inform people, and you have to educate them, and you have to get them involved, and you have to make them feel invested, and you have to make them um, feel appreciated, and you have to show them the impact of what they're doing, and what they're contributing, right? Um, and it's this whole cycle, and you need to make them feel a reason to stay within the cycle. And if you're not doing that, they can flip back out of that cycle at any point, and there is no um, guarantee that they're going to advance around that cycle. I should have brought my like flipboard, right? And so, and it really is at the end of the day, relationship building. And so when we talk about building community and this whole new like dichotomy of this hybrid world and this virtual world, it still takes a lot of work, and it's that psychological trust, and um it's still picking up the phone, right? And it's still um listening and understanding what is really needed from um the people that you're connecting with. And there's no um shorthand, and there's no um I know that we think technology speeds things up, right? Like, and we love checklists, and we're like, okay, we're going to do these things, and boom, 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 we're done, and move on to the next thing. But that's not really what building community and virtual communities is about, right? It's really about the ability to give people more access to others, and access to sharing, and crowdsourcing, and building a community in ways that we weren't able to do before, not making it faster. It's about making it more accessible.
I love that. And I see folks are talking about it in chat as well. We will need to see the diagram because this looks incredible. And I wonder too, just on the kind of on the note of lurkers and on all of this time and trust building that needs to take place to build these relationships. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the idea of lurkers. I like to call them observers, but I know that's a term that comes up in community quite a bit.
Yes, and lurkers have a place. They're important, right? Like that is this first step in. And that's that inform and educate piece in sort of the engagement component. And I hear myself saying a lot, and I have to tell myself this as well, right? Um, they have a space, and sometimes we can't always measure um, accurately the impact we're having on lurkers, but they are important because we don't know what they're actually um, getting sometimes, right? Like just by being there. But there's a space for them, and the important component is that sort of next step in the cycle. How can we then bring those lurkers into um, those deeper pieces, right? How do we help model the behavior and build that psychological trust to get them deeper into that cycle in engagement, right? But there's a space for lurkers, and the fact that they're showing up at all means that there is some level of investment there. That they're showing up, we're meeting some type of need for them. And that might be their baseline, that might be enough, right? I mean, we know there are lurkers on social media everywhere. Like some people just come for the comments, right? And sometimes that's enough for people. They're just coming to look for the information they needed in the community, right? Like they found it. They don't have to make a new post. They don't have to like, they are passively finding what they need. And we need to remind ourselves of that when we're building a community, when we're saying, "Oh, it's so slow. It's such a process. We need this tomorrow. We needed it yesterday," right? But it is. It's a slow process, and the key is reminding yourselves of those baby steps and of the fact that that's how a real relationship often works as well. Like you will always have those diamonds in the rough in real life, online, but that is not the norm. That is the exception.
Awesome. I love that. I think we talk about lurkers so much, and not always. It's always with the idea of moving them into being something else. So, I love the focus you place on giving those folks space to learn and kind of move at their own pace. I want to make sure that we have time to take questions from folks. So
Yes.
I'm going to move into another question, but if you have questions, folks, feel free to put them in chat or start raising your hands in the next 5 minutes or so. But when we spoke, Penny, you talked about finding champions in your community. And I would love to hear more about how you empower those folks to make the community their own. And what is the importance of trust on both the member side and the facilitator side in building those relationships?
So sometimes it's much easier to find champions. It's that, those people that maybe already had that pattern to begin with. The Annettes of the world that I referenced, or the Chris Kellys of the world that Annette knows very well, or Alicia that's on this call, people that already have those established behaviors um, that you have seen in other meetings or in other parts of your life that you ask, right? But you have to ask, right? That's that old volunteer adage, like, if you don't ask, they're not going to do it. And we were standing up a community about 2 weeks ago within the AAMC, a new community. And I was speaking with the person in charge of this constituent group. And, we were talking about the importance of having champions. And so he identified two folks who kind of have been kind of rallying around this group and kind of more outspoken. And so we had a conversation with them, and immediately they were like, "Oh, yeah, got it. Okay, so and they just started amongst each other on the call, right? And they were like, and Harold, if you post XYZ documents, that will make sure that we get more people into the community because it, right? So automatically churning, but making sure that when you're talking with people, constantly understanding the with them, right? Like the what's in it for me and understanding, and that can change, right? You talk to people about what they need and then you build it and then they're like, you know what, that's not, no, no, that that's not what we need, not it. And hi, Susan Orr. And then really constantly having those open conversations and being transparent, right? That volunteer background. If you're not transparent and you're not having those conversations and allowing your champions to have that, your partners in this, right? Um, and being able to have that, um, take risks and having that growth mindset and kind of learning and growing in it together. If you're not in the journey and not going through the journey together and giving people room to learn and grow and build new skills and be their authentic selves through the process and asking people to be a part of the journey, you're losing that opportunity because it's theirs, right? It's theirs as well.
I love the framing of going through the journey together, and giving folks that ownership. And again, I want to make sure that we have time for questions from the folks who are here. So I'm going to do my final question, which is, you've talked a little bit about communities as potential equity builders, and especially in talking about community building in the context of the pandemic, in the context of social justice movements or movements for improving healthcare. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you see community in the context of equity building.
And I touched on this a little bit, right, in my excitement to take on a role like this full time. That is, and that is the beauty of having something like a virtual community in any, right, whether you are building something internally within your own organization for your employees, whether you're doing something externally, something that's hybrid. Um, I think that there's so much potential in the way that we work and the way we frame things now, and another one, right, trying to find a positive in the hellaciousness that has been the last 19 months. Um, in knowing that we talk a lot about wicked problems, and there are a lot of them, right? And if you're not familiar, right, wicked problems are things that are very complex, and there's no easy, easily defined um, outcome or way to solve, and there are many complex, intertwined things for them. For example, the concept of the healthcare system. um, and so having something like a virtual community and building a community, a true community, you bring uh, the concept of all the right people to the table. And um, a virtual community, a real community, helps to break down some of those barriers and silos because, again, it expands your community reach. Um, you don't have to be a paying member to come into a community if you set this up right. You don't have to be in any certain physical location to be a member or to join a community, right? You can um, be a voice that is heard, right? If we're talking about social determinants of health, if you really want to fix and solve a wicked problem, you have to have all the people at the table that go into that wicked problem. And that takes a lot of dynamics, and there's a lot of logistics at play. And the only way you can really do that is to have a forum where people can actually have access points and really be heard and talk about these things and share their ideas and share their experiences and literally crowdsource, right? And have that access. Is it perfect? No. But could we get there and start to really take on some of these things in more meaningful conversations and meaningful ways and start to really bring then some of these subject matter experts together from these fields and really start to work on these projects in new ways from all over the world, right? That is what this can really do. So all of these kind of paradigms around what Facebook and all of these other horrible things we think about technology now because they are horrible, there are still really meaningful opportunities to collaborate and to connect and create meaningful change and impact through community building through a virtual world.
Creating that container for opportunity is so, so important. I'm going to grab some questions from chat. Molly asked, we are building online communities in a saturated world. People have a lot going on, and adding community interaction can feel like just another task added to a to-do list. How do you go about creating a space that people want to show up to?
That's a hard one, right? But it's about communicating and figuring out what the added value is for people. Why, what aren't they getting somewhere else? And why would they want or need to connect and build this community that you are offering? And asking, not assuming, but asking. And constantly asking, because again, you can build that community and offer it up, and that still might not quite meet the need. And so that constant communication is super important, right? And being really mindful of those things. We know that people want to learn and connect. So being mindful of what are the barriers for them, right? The barriers to access and being where they are and being mindful of, right? Like not just being, we are as a communications background person, the messages in the medium. Michelle, you can tell that I used it. I said it. She'll be very proud of me. The messages in the medium, right? It's not about copy and paste and just dump it from a website into this thing. It's about that added experience and how you can really create that added value, because there's so much noise and so much added stuff out there. How do you cipher through it? And the way to do that is to ask, what is that added thing that they need? Is it the connection? And how do you then create that meaningfully for them? And finding those champions to really create that peer-to-peer behavior and modeling that and creating that psychological trust is really, really key.
I love that.
And if other people have suggestions as well, right? Because it's not in a vacuum, and there are no, again, this is not checklist stuff. It's really about trial and error, but communication is key, truly.
The emphasis on asking. So good. Steve asked in chat, what's one of your favorite stories of something someone has been empowered to change at work thanks to one of your communities?
Oh, that's a good one. I think that with the MVP group, the Mission Vision Pack, I think that the dynamic there in particular, when you think about ERGs, BRGs, business resource groups, and building a community in general, the culture of our BRGs, the way they were structured at Highmark, you had to get your supervisor's approval to join. You had to be in, right there. There were some barriers to entry. People often came and said, "Well, I'm not a people leader," and I would often hear, "I'm just an admin." That's literally, those were the words, right? And I think just from the context of the way that community was structured, it was very much about empowering people to think about just being transformational leadership does not have anything to do with your title or your position within the organization, right? It's really about you being able to share your ideas and support one another and the way you think, and this place being a safe space to share those ideas with one another. And so I think that that was a very small space and start for that sort of cultural shift and mindset within that group, that it was okay to exercise and practice that way of thinking and not this very hierarchical kind of structure and way that things were set in the past.
I love that. And I will take Jesse's question as our final question. I'm gonna pop on to read this one. How do you have a frank conversation with a leader who believes they're inclusive, but their biggest challenge is getting real and honest feedback and speaking about challenges with a small team? For context, the leader is a white woman and the team are all younger, mostly younger Latinx.
Um, Jesse, that is, I mean, I don't pretend to be an expert in this field in particular, but I would say that um, I would say that whew, in my experience, to me, this is something that depending on where you work and who you work with, I would hope that you have, um, or these people, whoever you're talking with and for, that there are some um, folks that, whether it's HR, whether it's DEI, um, because this seems like a very personal and specific issue, that you could talk to about some coaching and resources within your company, um, because I don't want to say something that might be out of line, not knowing the whole context of this. I would say, in regards to leaders who aren't great at getting feedback, um, that that is, that's probably something we've all either experienced, or well, I hope not everyone has experienced. Um, Feedback is hard. I would take that back to um, that concept of fixed versus growth mindset, right? And how we um, kind of view feedback and how we deliver feedback, and really trying to reset and reframe um, those conversations. And the 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 crux of it is, we have to really, as organizations, as departments, as leaders, um, as humans, have to understand that as a society we have failed. We have created this society where failure is this horrific thing, and we have to be perfect and can't fail. And I think the beauty of something um, like when we build community and we find people where we have a safe space to dialogue and experiment and try things, that is the concept of growth mindset, right? We have to be allowed to experiment and fail. Failing is the only way we can learn. And we have to allow ourselves to do that. And when we're leaders, we have to allow ourselves to show that to to our staff. And as community leaders, we have to be allow ourselves to share that with others, even as a staff person going through this, right? Trying to navigate it and trying to approach it in a different way. Um, and uh, talking to another leader, talking to someone in HR, and trying to get the right support in how you're dealing with it, and learning through it is is the only way you can kind of work grow with it, because unfortunately going through those hard experiences, it's the only way we can continue to learn and grow, right? Even through those really tough scenarios. I'm sorry, I am not a DEI leader, so I that is not my expertise. I'm sorry.
I think some folks jumped in on chat too, and were saying that this is a really good question for kind of a deeper dive conversation.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think we can definitely continue the conversation in the cultivators community as well. It feels like also, Jesse, just an opportunity for folks to find community with each other too,
Yes.
and support in a situation that's incredibly hard. And I hope that manager is also finding maybe some support
Mhm.
in growth and leadership and taking feedback. But we can for sure continue discussing in the Cultivate community. Molly just linked that for us in the chat. And again, we hope you will check it out if you are not in there already. We have reached the end of our time. It went so fast. But thank you all so much for being here. Especially thank you, Penny, for stepping up, for doing my first event with me, as I was rusty and learning the ropes. So thank you. Just learning from you, hearing you say things about being a connector first and making sure to go out of your way and pick up the phone and talk to folks outside the container of community, and also asking to give folks that opportunity to step up and take that ownership and form those connections is I think a really beautiful framing around whatever type of community you're trying to or are building. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us and your experience with us. There's a lot of love for you in the chat that I hope you will check out. Folks, I
Um,
am
my love to all of you. It warms my heart to see so many community of mine in this space, and they make the world better every day. So keep growing your communities.